So we're talking about parenting with scripture, and Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it." So basically, we're thinking about how can we apply that to our children now. You might have toddlers, or you may have school-age children, maybe preteens or teens. Out of my 6 kids, 2 of them are teens, and the other 4 are in their 20s. So I've got what I call my grown kids, or my YACKs, my young adult child or kid. I call them my YACKs, my grown kids. So I've got YACKs, and then I've got teens. And so some of you may have younger children, and that's fine. This applies to all ages. So when we think of training a child in the way he should go, the first word we hear is train. And so when we're thinking of training our children, it is a process. It's a process that goes on for some time. It's not a one-shot deal. It's not even a 2 or 3 shot deal. It's a training that goes on and on. You think about training the same exact way you think about training for an athletic event, or training for a new career, or if you're studying for a test and you have to kind of train your mind in a certain way. It's the same concept. So with your kids, you get certain character traits or certain qualities you're trying to grow in them or to teach them about and get them to practice, and you want to train through that. So if you train your children in, say, honesty, our kids are gonna lie. They're gonna lie. I mean, you lied when you were a kid, right? Don't you remember that? People lie, and kids lie when they're little because immediately they don't want to get in trouble, or they think something bad's going to happen, or somehow they believe if they say what's true in that moment, it's going to be a negative consequence. And so they lie. So to teach your children not to lie is kind of against their desire to preserve themselves, to stay out of trouble, or keep away whatever they think is going to be bad. So it makes sense that you're going to have to train them to be honest. It's not going to just happen. There are other qualities, character traits, to be responsible. How about not leaving the house without taking your keys when you leave, or getting your oil changed on your car, because if you don't, your car's going to seize up. So there's all these responsibilities: getting to work on time, getting to school on time, doing your homework, so many things around the house, chores. Like in my home, we always had chores. Because there's 6 kids, we had this chore list that was literally a very detailed chart, and it had the types of chores, it had the lists of each child's name, and oftentimes we would pair the kids up and have to do certain stuff, like if the twins had to do all the vacuuming, so they would vacuum the living room, the sitting room, they'd vacuum the hall, the stairs, or whatever, and that was like the twins' job. And then my 2 older kids, they maybe had to do the 2 bathrooms and the half bath or whatever. So we had chore lists, and they had to do their chores, and that was a responsibility, because after the chores were done, we had a chore checker who would go and check the chores and make sure that they did it right. And if they didn't, they had to go back and fix it, which is because that's responsibility, right? Do it right. So like, that saying goes, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, I hope you have time to do it again. So as you're training your kids, you're getting them to become more and more responsible. So meanwhile, train a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not turn from it. So here's the challenge. It's you're training them all this time while they're kids and teens, and then it's when they're old, they won't turn from it. So there's a time frame between the time you're training them and the time that they kind of go through their own life, make their own decisions, use some of the stuff they taught, and then kind of go explore a little bit. And what the Bible's telling us is that they will come back to the training if you give them the training. They will come back to it. So if they kind of drift off and start exploring some other avenues, hanging with different friends, or maybe trying some different things, they will come back to what they were trained on. So that means you have to diligently teach and train enough such that it is ingrained in them. So my YACKs, they remember a lot of stuff when they were growing up, the things we used to teach them and the things we used to say. And they remember that. So now as adults, they can utilize some of that stuff that they learned. Of course, our kids are going to go off and do stuff their own way. This can be really challenging. Some parents, a lot more challenging than others. Because to let your child make these decisions that aren't good at all, you have to let them make them. What are you going to do? I mean, if your child's 8, you can get involved with that. When your child's trying to make a decision, no, you're not doing that because you're 8. Or even 12, or even 14. As they get into the higher teens and then start to be young adults, what are you going to do? For me, if you're living in my house, high teen or not, you're still going to follow some rules. But when you get out on your own, what am I supposed to stop you from doing? If you want to go do something, you're going to do it. That's what adults do. And they pay the price, good or bad. Sometimes the consequences are good. Sometimes not so much. As you're raising them, there's a lot you have to do to protect them from some of these decisions. If you just sit still and think about some of the things you did when you were a teenager or young 20, even, gosh, last week, right? And you think like that was not a good decision. But you think back to some of those things your parents protected you from, because those decisions were life-altering decisions and they protected you from that. But some of those can't be protected. You make the decision, you pay the consequence for it. As they get older, they will not turn from it. You put this in perspective. Sometimes as you're raising your children, they seem to be right on track. Like they seem to be taking in the training. They see, and I'm saying seem in quotes, right? Because the compliant child, the one who does everything they're supposed to do, they seem, well behaved. They just kind of get off track here and there, but they're easygoing. They don't require a whole lot of discipline because they kind of fall in line. That may be fine. But sometimes it seems like that, and then as they get off on their own or they get older, they start to veer off from what they were taught. And they start maybe hanging with a bad crowd, or they start smoking or drinking, or they start doing risky behaviors, cheating, or just different things that you're looking like a parent like, what is happening? Who is this child? Like, I did not raise this child. This is not how I raised you. What are you doing? And you have to understand as a parent that the kids, as they mature, they start to come into their own thoughts and ideas, and they start to push away from you naturally as a parent and start to stand on their own in their own thoughts. And they may say like, this is what my parents used to say, but I don't agree with that. I don't think that now. And they want to go explore what they think. And that's healthy. That's normal. That is a part of life. And as parents, we have to find a way to be okay with that, because that's part of the growth process. So as they get out there, they break away. The child who seemed compliant, who seemed to go along with all of the teaching and training, is now kind of off in left field doing all sorts of things. I don't know what. You're going to have to, keep reaching out to them, keep showing them, and keep teaching and training. And you may have to ground them or redirect them or whatever. But ultimately, they're going to have to explore that. On the other side of that coin, you might have that child who seems like they're not taking in anything you're saying. They're just rebelling against everything. You're training, and they're just rebelling and pushing away, and they're going against everything that you're saying. And yeah, I definitely have a couple of those where it seems like they just can't seem to get it together. And even then, that child, they've got to find their way. They may be more of a hard-headed child or a stubborn, willful child who has their own idea about what they want to do. And they may bump into the wall quite a few times, and they may get in a lot of trouble. They may just, have issues with authority. It's so many things. But as a parent, it hurts because you're watching this kid constantly bump into the wall and do the wrong thing over and over and over again. And you're thinking, when is this kid going to learn? Like, why do you keep doing that same dumb stuff? What are you doing? But again, they've got to learn. That's their journey. The same way I had to learn, and each of us will have to learn. That child has to find their way. They may be erratic. They may eventually mature. And again, like I always say it, the frontal part of your brain, not quite developed as a teenager. As a early 20, not quite all the way there. So as that piece starts to finish its development, the cause and effect and the looking ahead and figuring out my actions today are going to affect something tomorrow, that stuff starts to kick in a little bit more, and we say the kid's maturing, or you're maturing into an adult, so you seem to be a little more level-headed. And that's part of the reason for that. I have an example. Your kid says, hey, can I go to, my friend Leela's house? And you trust Leela, and you're like, well, sure, go hang out with Leela, that's fine. And then somehow you find out that your kid wasn't at Leela's house at all, snuck off with some other kids and went somewhere else. So they deceived you, they lied, and now your trust is broken. So you're thinking, I'm going to have to discipline this child, and I'm going to have to help them understand that you can't do that. In the meantime, the child wants to do what they want to do. What are you going to do? You're going to lay down the law, you're going to discipline your child, but at a certain point, they're going to have to face the consequence of their actions. And as a parent, you're going to have to let them. When your child's younger, you can control a lot more of that. You can say, no, you're not going to the mall. No, you're not going to so-and-so's house. I'm not going to let you be with these friends. You have control over that. But when they turn into a teen and they start spending more and more time away from you, you're not with your kid 24 hours a day. They go to school, maybe when they start driving, they have a job. I mean, they can lie, cheat, and go places, and you really wouldn't know. How would you know? But you're going to have to trust that the training that you put into them is going to help, guide them as they go along. And that's why the Bible says, train a child in the way they should go. And when they are old, they will not turn from it. So there'll be times when they're kind of venturing off and doing what they're doing. But eventually they'll circle back around if you give them that foundation, that home base to come back to. So that's it for today. It was really fun hanging out with you guys. And I will check you out another time. Easy.